All right, everybody, welcome to Talk Recovery Radio. You're tuning in to us. Darren, how's it going? Unmute you there. Hello, Darren.
Excellent.
Excellent. How are you, Darren?
Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good. It's been an
Can you hear me?
interesting week, and I can totally hear you. Yeah, totally hear you. Welcome to Talk Recovery Radio, everybody. We come to you live every Thursday. The first 30 seconds are always a bit nerve-wracking because we're not in the studio. COVID response, the radio station has been shut down. And so we, like many other radio shows, have become innovative, and we're doing a Zoom live right now on Facebook. And if you're listening to us live on the radio, 100.5 FM, you're listening to last week's show, and they rebroadcast the shows a week later. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hello, everybody. Darren, what a week. What a week. Have you been catching any of our, we've been doing recovery talks for the BCCSU on Wednesdays, and it's been quite interesting to say the least. They all came out of, we were noticing a lot of messaging coming from provincial and federal health health industries in the government, like Health Canada and the provincial health authorities and so forth, about how to respond to COVID when it comes to substance use. And all the language was around safe supply, which I agree, there needs to be discussions about that. But we started to notice the word recovery, the idea of drug reduction, the idea of something else just was nowhere on the document. So this is in response to that, to make recovery a viable option during COVID-19 as well. And yesterday we had a bit of a Twitter. Twitter went on fire yesterday because they were saying we weren't being inclusive enough. And it's interesting, Darren, because if there's a panel on safe supply and no one in recovery is on that panel, no one bats an eye. The Minister of Health sends a 10-page document about dealing with addiction during COVID. The word recovery is nowhere in the package. No one bats an eye. The minute we do a recovery panel that doesn't have every single million pathway to recovery voice on it, everyone, criticizes, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I just noticed the emails I'm sure we both receive out of Ontario, Health Canada.
Yeah.
The opioid response team. I've been sort of like glancing over. I got to a point where I was just like tired of reading how much funding was going into basically like what they were doing for this crisis and in response to the opioid pandemic was just education, notices, like new terms of dealing with people dealing with vulnerabilities, like nothing really in provision for these people, other than a temporary housing in hotels that aren't being run in their regular way. And it was just, I don't know, I kind of felt disgusted the same way that there wasn't anything about something new, something innovative, something therapeutic to provide for these people. So it makes me sick hearing that there has to be some sort of ignorant response to those that are on a more specific subject like recovery, getting lashback about being too inclusive. It's ridiculous.
I mean, I want everyone to just like think about it. Like in Vancouver, thousands of people have died, and a sprinkle of treatment beds have been opened up, just a sprinkle. And just a little bit of money has been given, for drug reduction and recovery. And for COVID, they built a hospital that no one uses at the convention center, staffed 24/7. No one's even there. but yet for addiction, like there wasn't this like $1 billion, let's just, like, these people need help. It's quite interesting, the responses to COVID compared to addiction, which is killing many people and costing the economy tons of money as well. So just people need to think about that. Like, why is there why was a hospital not built at the convention center years ago when kids started dying from overdoses? Like, why not? To help people. Like, but yet now it's just like, and there's not even anybody in it, which is even more bizarre. Anyway, that's our rant for the start of the show. We're trying to be inclusive when we say many pathways, but you know what? We're going to stick up for 12-step recovery. We're going to stick up for abstinence-based recovery because we have to, because when you look at Health Canada's documents, the word recovery is nowhere found in it. So we need to have these discussions, and they're not easy, and they're stressful, and you know what, I just want to thank everybody else that's on those panels with me that are doing those talks. The next one is next Wednesday at noon. Just Google BCCSU recovery webinar and you'll be able to register for the last one. Talk Recovery Radio comes to you live every Thursday on 100.5 FM, Vancouver Co-op Radio. You can replay our shows at talkrecoveryradio.com. We're on SoundCloud, we're on iTunes, 6 seasons of shows, thousands of listeners, hundreds of guests. Thanks to everybody that's participated in making Talk Recovery an awesome show. Thank you. And we have 2 guests on the show. Later on, we're going to be talking to Peter, who is going to share his personal story of trauma and recovery and where he's at today at 8 years in recovery. So we'll be welcoming Peter later on in the show. Darren, who are we starting the show off with today?
Yeah, today we get to talk recovery with Jean McCarthy, and we'll just wait for her to pop in before we get too involved in her introduction.
It says joining.
Okay.
It says joining. Ooh, sometimes this Zoom thing, now there's 2 of her. There she is.
Hi, Jean. How are you?
Hey.
So I was just waiting for your face to come onto the screen before giving you an introduction. Welcome to Talk Recovery. Jean McCarthy, you're coming from Alberta. Is that right?
True. I am.
Okay,
yes.
so fellow Canadian, author, blogger, podcast host, and we'll throw in singer-songwriter as well. This is great because, I mean, you do very close to what we do with the podcast, which is called The Bubble Hour.
That's right.
And I mean, the blogger, which is Unpickled, that goes back to 2011. So there's so much content on that. I was having a difficult time, like, where do I start? What kind of questions do I have? Because as interviewers, we rarely get to talk about ourselves. Obviously in your blogs, you have a lot of your own story. I wanted to ask a little bit more specific to your story, which would be, most of us spend a long time sitting on the fence. It's not just, I know I have a problem, and then all of a sudden just reveling in joy at the choices we've made to make change. There's a lot of time on the fence. Am I going to have any fun being sober, clean? What's my social life going to look like? What was it like for you on the fence? And how much time did you spend on the fence?
The idea of a fence implies much more stability than I felt at that point. It was maybe more like a teeter-totter or a rocking horse or something. I would say a
fence in disrepair.
Yeah, exactly. A fence in the wind, a wobbly fence in the wind. I think it was, looking back, I could see a daily cycle. I would say there was almost a decade where every day was going to be the day. And every morning was like gung-ho, this is it. I feel so good. But by noon, something good would happen or something bad would happen. You pick. And then, and also now I understand too, that I would also by that time be starting to metabolize the alcohol that I drank the night before. So what I thought was a shift in my will or a shift in my day was also a shift in my body. and I would start craving alcohol, and then I would start justifying why today could not possibly be the day. It's either too good a day or too bad a day, but it's not the day. And I'd be drinking, wine while I was cooking dinner, every day. So that's what it felt like for me. And then I would have the self-loathing phase, and then I'd wake up the next morning ready to go again. This is going to be the day, and then it wasn't the day.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that.
It's difficult because I think when you get to a point where you've transcended that on the fence, that questioning it all, and I mean, clearly you're thriving in a life of recovery, found joy, found happiness, found the fun, the excitement, and it's now, I'm assuming, like, you couldn't see it any other way.
Yeah, I think I'm the person I always wanted to be, for sure. That I feel like I'm living really wholeheartedly and really honestly, which I wasn't before. I couldn't say that about myself before. If you had asked me at the time, and in fact, I wrote this on the early posts on my blog, that my life was perfect except for the alcohol. And we can laugh about that now, because we know that the alcohol is definitely a sign that things are not perfect. But I had arranged all the pieces the way I thought they should be. And it was very perplexing to me how someone whose life was as supposedly wonderful as mine was being plagued by alcohol, and how someone who really I felt like I had it together. I felt like I built a really great life, and it was mysterious to me why I had this trouble controlling this one part of my life. And so I thought it would be a pretty quick fix, honestly. Like, I knew I was quitting forever. That part I understood, but I sort of thought I'd be done transitioning after a few months, and then I thought it would be normal.
Right.
And I was not prepared for the fact that I was going to have to take apart the whole Lego house and rebuild it from the bottom up, and that what I would be left with would be something even better. So that was a happy surprise.
We had a discussion last week about those that are living perfect life, as you would say, a little bit more difficult to acknowledge the problem drinking, or the problem pill use, let's say, or whatever the excuses can be. And I mean, it's so difficult to acknowledge a forever change when there's all these excuses that we can give to it. I'm curious, what was it for you that, like, was it a very serious traumatic bottom? Was it just a really great conversation and good people around you that helped through that stage? Like, what was it for you that allowed you to keep going?
I basically had an epiphany, and you could call it a God shot. You could say that all of the things that had been ruminating for years were finally clicked unexpectedly into place. You could call it a miracle. I don't know what it was, but I was sitting at a banquet and hosting a table of ladies, and we had a motivational speaker was the act, the entertainment for this banquet. And she said to the audience, close your eyes and think of a goal. I'm going to lead you through an exercise. And so I thought, well, I want to climb Machu Picchu someday. So that's going to be my goal, Machu Picchu. And I closed my eyes, and I felt a hand come down out of the ceiling, I think, and smack me on the chest. And I heard the words, I need to quit drinking. And I happened to be drinking at that moment. I had wine in front of me, so I didn't really want to have that epiphany right there in front of everybody. And I was a little bit afraid that I had actually said those words out loud, I need to quit drinking, because I was at a table full of women. Right. And I looked around to see, did I say that out loud, or is everybody looking at me? But no, they all had their heads down because they were following the instruction of the speaker, who was saying, think about your goal. And so I thought, okay, let's try this again. Machu Picchu. Never mind this stop drinking stuff. Now's not the time for that. Yeah. And I closed my eyes again, and I felt it again. I need to quit drinking.
Wow.
And uh, um, like I said, I had been cycling through this every day, up and down for years at this point, never being able to quit for more than a day or two. So it wasn't entirely a surprise, but what was new was that I had this um, feeling in my chest of, I equate it to this. If you've ever seen a puppy wander into the highway and you gasp, you like, and you want to just save that puppy, that feeling in your chest, I had that feeling and it wouldn't go away. And I tried for 2 more days to drink it away and I couldn't make it stop. And I decided, maybe this is my miracle. Maybe this feeling will sustain me. And so that was it. And then I did something else that I'd never done before. And that was I had 2 more days of drinking. And the next morning I went for a hike with a friend and I told her the truth. I told a friend how much I drank and that I felt I needed to quit. And I'd never done that before. I'm married. My husband had no idea how much I was drinking. We had teenagers at home at the time. They didn't know. So to actually tell someone the truth was a really big deal. And that felt great too.
Right. And so that was the beginning of a successful introduction into sobriety, or were there more speed bumps along the way? Did it have that much?
It had that much impact. That was the last day. So that was 9+ years ago. And I haven't drank since. And I've certainly wanted to at times. It hasn't just been easy peasy. But when I think back to that day, I can feel that feeling in my chest, even as I'm telling you about it, even now, all these years later. It was that profound. And I think what it was really was a realization that this was going to kill me, that this kills women, especially quickly.
Right.
And I hadn't had a lot of consequences yet. And I think part of me was waiting for something to happen that would make me have to quit, that would make the decision for me. And I dreaded that. I had 3 teenage boys. I didn't want them to have their lives disrupted and to have some tragedy enter into our family. And I kept thinking, like, what's it going to be that happens? What's going to happen? And I was dreading it. I was terrified of it. And so to realize this thing is getting worse, not better, and it ends in death. I knew that if you don't stop. And wait a minute, I don't have to have something terrible happen. I can just quit. You don't have to smoke a pack of cigarettes before you quit smoking. Nobody says, oh, keep smoking till you get to 25 a day. That's when you quit, and you don't have
a lung disease
diagnosis
or something.
Yeah, right. We just say, no, that's bad for you. You shouldn't do that. Or, you don't have to have a blistering sunburn before someone says, hey, buddy, put some sunscreen on. Like, it's kind of the same thing. It was just this awareness of this idea that I had to have a rock bottom.
Yeah, the idea of a bottom for some reason has become this staple of when it's time to start a recovery process. And the culture I thankfully found recovery in, the culture is you don't have to hit bottom. The bottom is when you stop digging, and you don't have to. Most people recover not on their, it's not even that bad of a day. They've had worse days, and it's just that moment in time. So here you are, you're getting past your denial phase, you're getting past the taboo subjects of being, am I a mom alcoholic? What's for the viewers that may have a daughter or a wife or a sister that's at that phase, like, yeah, I got a drinking problem, but it's you, it's not me. How did you get to the next step, and how can we help other women get to that next step?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, the obstacle was shame. I really felt a lot of shame. And I felt like an imposter. I had a lot of validation in my life. I was doing really well at work, and I was getting a lot of praise and awards and rewards, and I was really hooked on that. But I also had no enjoyment of it. Whatever I achieved, I wanted the next thing, because I also felt like I didn't deserve it. So I just sort of felt like I'd fooled everybody. And it was like, proof that it was working. So I had to dismantle that idea, not only that I wasn't actually achieving things, but that I had to achieve things in order to be, or to earn, hustle for my worthiness is what Brene Brown calls it. Like the idea of, we don't need to do that. You know, I'm okay just as I am. And I don't, this idea that I had to stay in motion in order to feel safe, that there was some critic somewhere that was going to come and expose me at any given moment, not just as someone who drank too much. Certainly I felt shame about that, but also just this inherent unworthiness.
Yeah.
And so what I understand now is that I really grew up with a view of myself as being only important as I was seen by others, and not so much in a narcissistic way, if that's really a thing, but more of a external validation. Like, to me, I honestly didn't think I existed in my own eyes. I didn't care what I thought because I didn't value my own opinion.
Yeah.
So, you know, that comes up in other ways too. I really struggled as a younger woman with an eating disorder. And I could 100% pretend that wasn't happening because nobody else saw it. And it didn't occur to me that I was seeing it and I was just as valid as you or anyone else. Like, I valued other people's opinions, not just more than my own, but I didn't even know I had one.
And this
So
is the reason why so many people need to understand why recovery isn't just this one moment in time. We constantly have to either go to meetings or seek therapy or counseling or be around like-minded people, whatever your pathway is, because addiction isn't just the alcohol. It's not just the drugs. It's the idea that I'm not worthy. It's the idea of what people think about me. I'm not good. Like, we just need to be reminded that, like, the freedom I got when I realized, like, it's okay what people think about me. Like,
yeah.
I don't need to like drink myself out of a situation because I feel uncomfortable. Like, that was just, you know, a huge awakening and so forth. And it's one of those opportunities where, you know, people have to realize, like, we're focusing so much on opiates right now and so much on just the actual effect of the drug and how to deal with that, that we're forgetting this whole piece. In your career of talking to people, have you found that we're getting closer to understanding what a holistic approach to addiction is, or do you think we're actually building more silos?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're getting there. Things are definitely more accessible, and I feel like because people are able to explore ideas about recovery online, when they're in that curiosity phase, or I always talk about the stages of change. So when they're in the contemplation stage or the preparation stage, now we just go to Google. I mean, we can look things up. And now there's so much information there, so many stories, so many conversations like this, that we're broadening the conversation. And I think that's good. There's certainly a lot more there. But yeah, there are silos. I would agree with you there as well. And so sometimes if what someone stumbles into is a heated discussion about abstinence versus harm reduction, or one pathway versus another pathway, and it happens to be two people that are really, really passionate about it, the conflict can scare them away from all of recovery. And I really think our wily little addictive voice in our head leverages anything it can get his hands on to keep us drinking, right? So I think that too, that to some extent, when people stumble upon contentious conversations and conflict, they hook into that instead of the fact that, hey, people are talking about this. This is great, you know? So things are changing, but
I wonder what you do from a standpoint of, you know, the followers, the listeners, the viewers of your show, the visitors to the website. Like Giuseppe and I mean, we come from our own personal program of recovery, and we've always wanted to maintain a non-biased approach to this show and not be inclusive to our personal program. First of all, do you share where you come from, and how do you approach, you know, the potential of not acquiring a listener, someone to engage because of, well, they don't agree with your program, let's say?
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of have to decide pick a lane, I think, to some extent. And if that is going to be all pathways, you know, everything's good, then you might bump up against your own boundaries that you didn't know you had, you know? So especially now that, you know, pot is legal in Canada. So that's a whole new question, you know, that's a whole new thing. And so for me, the only boundary that I've kind of put on for the show is that it's abstinence based. So for me, that means drugs and alcohol, 100% abstinent. So, but I'm still okay with people talking about, you know, having to reduce to get to abstinence, but abstinence being the goal. That's the lane that I'm in. I don't argue with anybody that's in another lane or has found success another way. That's fantastic. That's great. It's just not what my show's about. But let me help you find a place where you can talk about that and explore, you know, common threads or whatever. That it's great that we're having lots of different conversations about things. So that's what I've tried to do. You're right. Sometimes that means that for some people, they need to go somewhere else, but I try to keep it pretty broad.
Yeah. What was the inspiration for you to begin this journey of, you know, exposing your own personal story and putting it out there? Like, what was it? How, you know, was it to begin as a sort of a therapeutic, you know, journey for yourself?
Therapy. So the inspirational speaker I was telling you about earlier, who told us to close our eyes, she told a beautiful story about how she had written a blog for her mother as a gift to her mother for her 90th birthday. And she told this story about how she knew her mother wasn't reading it because she checked the stats every day and it was at 0. And then came the day where her mother learned how to read a blog at 90 and she saw 1. And then, so this was this great story about how it went from 0 to 1. And then every day she could tell that her mother read her blog. So I went home from having had this epiphany and I had this story in my head that, hey, this blog thing, I could write that. And if one person saw it, I'd know. And one person's all I need. So I wrote it anonymously for accountability. And I really hoped for one reader. That's all I wanted. And I never, ever expected to ever not be anonymous with it. But that sort of unfolded over time. So what ended up happening was that it turns out the way blogs work, I had no idea, you know, people were searching sobriety or sober blogs or sober stories and coming across my story. And I was writing every day of just, you know, how many oranges I ate the night before instead of drinking or whatever. And then people were commenting to encourage me, which was beautiful. And I'm forever grateful to those people. They got me through. And then a few weeks later, the comments started to transition to where someone would say, I'm on day 1 and you're on day 14 and you're helping me. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm helping someone else. So in my great dysfunction and drunken egomania, I sort of forgot that anyone else might ever quit drinking. I just sort of thought I was the last person ever who would. So it never occurred to me that my blog would help other people. That was not my goal. And when I realized that was happening, you know, a layer peeled off and I discovered service. So ironically, a lot of the principles of the 12-step program kind of revealed themselves organically to me. And then when I learned about them later, I thought, oh, this is helpful. Oh, this is actually a thing. I need to keep doing this. This will keep me sober.
Yeah, I heard earlier this week on our panel that I did on yesterday, the best way to learn something is to teach it. And that's the whole philosophy of being of service. It's not just to like do free work. It's actually a way to learn for yourself how to do something, and how to get good at it as well, and start to know people and care about other things other than yourself. So if you're listening to us right now on 100.5 FM, you're listening to last week's show. On Facebook Live, here we are talking to Jean, and we're on Talk Recovery Radio, 100.5 Vancouver Co-op Radio. And Jean hosts the Bubble Hour, and she also has a blog called Unpickled. So, Unpickled, why'd you pick the name? What does it mean for those that aren't in the know? And then I wanted to ask you too, well, starting to be not anonymous about recovery, how did that affect your ego? I know I went through some stuff in early recovery, Darren as well. Like, what do you talk about? What don't you talk about? So, Unpickled, where did that come from?
So I had, on my very first day, I had to just pick a blog, and it was like, pick a name. And I thought, well, I knew that I was forever changed. You know, there's an old expression that a pickle can't turn back into a cucumber again, but I didn't want to be a pickle anymore. So whatever a pickle is, when you take it out of the jar and it's not doing that anymore, I was that. And it just, I just honestly just came up with it on a whim and typed it in, and it was available. And so I used it. And so it took on a lot of meaning for me as time went on, but really all I was trying to say at the time is I'm something different now, and I don't know what it is, but I'm not what I used to be, and I'm not in dysfunction anymore. Whatever this next thing is, that's kind of where I'm at. And that's where the name came from. I didn't lift the veil of anonymity until I was over 2 years sober. And the first thing I did was I posted my picture on my blog, but not my name. And the only reason I did that was because whenever they would have these like clickbait of sober celebrities, I would just stare at those. I just wanted to see, like, can I see something different in their eyes? And I thought maybe it'll help someone to just see what I look like, because everything I was writing about on my blog was kind of mysterious. You know, when you're letting people make assumptions about you when you're completely anonymous. So a lot of people didn't even know if I was a man or a woman for a long time. And I just thought maybe just kind of showing who I am might just help someone see that, like, you know, just another person, you know, just another average person. And so I, very frightened, posted my picture, and absolutely nothing happened. Nobody cares. You know who's reading sober blogs? Not my neighbors, not the people I work with, people that need help, people that are like lost within their own misery, are looking for help. So it did help people. It was a good thing. And then eventually I was approached by a website and asked to actually write some blogs. And I did a little bit of paid writing for a few years. And that was when I started using my name. And then by then I realized, like, nobody cares. I just put it all out there. And I did not come through a program that required anonymity. So that really wasn't an issue for me. But like I said, I always said, well, to myself, well, why do they do that? So why do they suggest anonymity? How is that helpful? And so in understanding that, I realized you got to be careful about ego. You've got to be careful about saying you represent something. And by that time, I kind of understood that how to protect myself from slipping into that ego and feeling like this is about me, because this isn't about me. I'm not special. My story's not special. Both of you know yours isn't either, because we're all the same. We're all human. We all go through the same pattern, and that's the beauty of it. So the only thing different about me is that because I was by that time retired, I didn't have the pressure of worrying about my career. I sort of had the freedom to come out and talk about things. And also I kind of have the gift of gab. So I thought, if I can put the words to what everybody else is feeling, maybe I can help shine a light and just be part of this incredible movement that's happening, and, you know, step up, do a little, help a little. And when it's time to step back, I'll know.
Well, I think that when it comes to like, when we call them programs that we're doing, you know, it sort of takes on this, you know, theological approach. Is, you know, you get this understanding of what that program is by somebody else, and they got it by somebody else, and then you sort of just feel like you're just going through this obedience course. And you sent us a copy of The Ember Ever There: Poems on Change, Grief, Growth, Recovery, and Rediscovery.
Yeah.
And so this is coming out in June.
Mm-hmm.
We got it. I got a peek into it, and at first, I'm not a poetry guy. I don't like poems. Well, I don't write poems. Often find poems like I'm trying to like dig into the deep meaning, you know, the Robert Frost. What is he really saying? And I read through every poem of your book last night, and I'm only saying that because there wasn't this need for interpretation. It was just thoughts written eloquently. And when I got down to you do poems on each step.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, as a counselor in my field, I would try to remove the literal stuff from each step and just try to explain it in a layman terms. And when I was reading these poems on each step, I just thought, if we had those in a treatment center on the wall, and like you want a better understanding of the step, go read step 9 and just read through it. And it made perfect sense. It was exactly, to me, how I interpreted the step, what to expect, you know, and how, and then at the end it was just, but you've done it. And I can't, I just want people to look through this. If you're interested in the steps and, you know, you want sort of like the way to explain the step, you know, written out for you, this is a really great interpretation. I wouldn't even say interpretation. It's just, I don't know, it was the same thought process that I had with a lot of the versions. I love step 3. I mean, it was just fantastic. So I really hope people get a chance to look at these poems and the whole book. It was fantastic.
Oh my God, you're making me so happy right now. I had so much fear about sharing that section of the book.
Yeah.
Because it's one part of the book. There's 50 poems in the book. So there's 12 of them, each one dedicated to a step. And I really questioned, do I have a right to do this as someone who has not worked the steps? So thank you so much for your response to that. I have interviewed over 300 people on the Bubble Hour. Most of them have worked the 12 steps or participated in a 12-step program. And the reason I wanted to write poetry about it was exactly what you said. The steps can be so just wordy, or I don't know what, for those of us that aren't in that program. What struck me as I've talked to people about their recovery is the affection they have for the process. And it's not just the step, it's the process that happens within them when they've worked the step. And that doesn't come through to those of us who are unfamiliar with it and just reading the steps. We don't know that. It's hard to translate that. And so that's what I really wanted to do, was to reveal the emotions that I've heard people talk about around their experience of doing each of those steps. And so it's in a way a gift back to all of the people who taught me this by sharing their experiences, to try to pay homage to what they shared, but also to reveal for friends and families who just don't get it. Like, why do you keep going to these meetings? Why are you not done yet? What's going on there? Like, is the coffee that good? Are those friends that much better than us? Like, why do you have to keep going to these meetings? to see, oh my gosh, you're having this beautiful experience. That was really what I hoped to reveal. And of course, the other thing is a number of those poems are quite funny, or tried to be funny. And that was one thing that really surprised me when I have gone to 12-step meetings, as I do occasionally, is the laughter in that room. Boy, I really thought getting sober was going to be a drag. I thought it meant I would be boring and never laugh again. You want to laugh, like go to a 12-step meeting. People are laughing in there. So I wanted to capture that too, the joy and the humor that's involved in it.
Yeah, when people are new, they're shocked. Like, why are people happy? Why are people laughing? This is a serious issue. Like, we need tissue boxes, we need to cry, and we need to resolve, you know, the pain, and the idea that you can laugh your way to recovery is a huge gift. And just so all of our listeners know, like, the fact that you would write a book on poetry and on a subject that you haven't even written the steps on just shows how inclusive really the recovery process is. And it's like, yeah, I want to hear your interpretation. You know, I want to make sure that I'm not in this crazy closed environment that no one's allowed, you know, like people can come and go and make changes, you know. So, you know, it's refreshing to have this conversation, especially from what, you know, I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show, what, you know, when we're trying to be inclusive as much as we can, but I mean, we're all human. We never will be. There always will be somebody on the other side. And so I'm just really grateful that you would even pay homage to a program and like the way you did. So that is amazing. For those of you that are wondering where Peter is, we did have a personal story booked for the second half of the show, but we've lost Peter. We don't know where he is, so we've hijacked Eugene. So I'm okay with that.
I can keep talking.
Down. Yeah, like you're doing the full hour.
I'm
I hope that's okay. So, you know, with your poetry book and I'm sorry, with the bubble hour and so forth, all your guests and so forth, I know for myself, I've changed over the years doing talk recovery. I had this opinion and it's changed with the help of Darren and the help of all our many guests. How have you changed with your perception about what you thought recovery was and what recovery is today?
Whew, that's just a little question, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
Well, the probably the most important change that I've had is I've learned to just shush and listen. And the format that the bubble hour has morphed into is that, and I prepare people for this ahead of time. I introduce them and then I hold space in silence while they share their story. And silence was always really uncomfortable to me before. I felt like it needed to be filled because there was sort of this just discomfort in silence. I don't know what I thought might happen, but I think for people that are people pleasers and fall into that kind of codependent thinking of what everyone else thinks matters, you kind of manipulate people by being a people pleaser, by chattering away and trying to be charming and funny and entertaining and filling in all the gaps and all of that. So it was just a really great lesson for me to learn to hold space for someone in silence, and that silence is a gift, and that we just don't let people just talk sometimes. There'll be a pause in the story, and if you just wait, they might say the next thing. They might reveal a little more than they thought they would. They just sink a little deeper into their story, and it's really beautiful. So that is something that it's a new skill for me, and the flip side of it is that I also have learned to tolerate that kind of space being held for me. And I write about that in, there's part of a poem about that as well, where I say, you know, we learned this thing called holding space, and harder still, we learned to be helped, because that's really hard too when you're trying to control the conversation. You're trying to keep the focus off of yourself, you don't want people to get too close.
So many people want to be heard. What advice do you have? When we started Talk Recovery, we were approached by someone. We need to have a recovery show in the downtown East Side. When we are actually in the studio, we're at the corner of Columbia and Hastings, which is a very high drug user area of the city. And there's a station there called Radio. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. And there was a lot of, should we do this? I mean, do we want to go there every Thursday? And we persevered. You go on Facebook, there's lots of people get the zest for life, like that energy you get when you have whatever you want to call it, spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it. There's a zest for life, and they want to put it out there. So they want to do blogs, and they want to do shows, and they want to do something. They want to share that story. Lots of passion there. You've done a great successful, you got thousands of followers. What advice do you have for someone that's 6 months clean and wants to start a blog, and someone that's year clean and has this epiphany like you had? What advice do you give them?
Well, start small, I think, is okay. You don't have to go out and conquer the world. And I would say before you do something like that, know what your reasons for doing it are. If the reason is to express your joy, know that. If the reason is to help, shatter the stigma, know that, but then make a plan for it. I'm really glad that I was anonymous for the first good long while. I think I needed that. I really think it would have been detrimental to my recovery in the long run to have, even if it had been successful right off the bat, the blog and everything, which, it grew slowly over a decade. But a lot of what I shoulder as a blogger and a podcaster is, we spend an hour recording, another hour editing, and then 16 hours answering the emails of people saying, I need help. And I didn't know that would happen. And that there is what is the word I guess I'm looking for? I don't want to say there's a cost to that or whatever, but that takes a resource from you. It's a responsibility. Yeah.
For sure, definitely a responsibility with your
Yes.
word.
And when people reach out to you and they're needing help, one thing that's a challenge is that sometimes we're not really at our best when we're in dysfunction. So sometimes when people are reaching out, they might not be all that nice about it. They might not be all that pleasant about it. And that could be really triggering. And so you have to be pretty grounded in yourself and pretty well resourced with other people to back you up, that you can go to and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or how do I help this person? Because occasionally, not that often, but occasionally you'll get somebody who's just, they're really hurting. And sometimes that can be really hurtful to the person that's trying to help them. So I think it's fair to know that going in, of like, know what you're signing up for. It's not just that you're doing a blog, it's that you will get people that might want to ask you for help. Are you prepared to do that? Or do you have another direction to point them into? And sharing the enthusiasm is great, but I don't know. I know that there's sometimes a little bit of pushback. Oh, this person wrote a book and they're only X months sober. Well, I don't know. Again, is there like a magic number that you have to be?
Start date, yeah.
Yeah.
I got one more question and then you can finish us up. This is probably a deep question. I was going to ask it earlier. I hate asking these kinds of questions at the end. You mentioned your sons a few times. Mm-hmm. So, very common with people that, I work at Last Door, the Westminster House Program for Women, people coming in with kids. What are my kids going to think? What are my family going to think? I can't go to rehab. Everyone's going to think this. How did your kids respond to their mom? I don't know if you use the word alcoholic, but their mom needing to stop drinking. And oh my God, my mom's on the internet telling everybody, that this problem. Like, it's a big issue for a lot of people. So how did you get through it? Was it easy? Was it troublesome? What was involved in getting your kids to be like, right on, mom?
Well, they didn't know for the first little while. I didn't tell them at first. And like I said, they didn't really know how much I was drinking. So whatever behavior they were seeing, that was who they thought their mom was. So I think I was pretty high strung, pretty crabby, and pretty anxious. And so what they saw, I think, was an eye opener for them when I did finally tell them that I'd quit drinking. I think at first they probably thought I was on another diet or on another cleanse or, whatever. When you're a teenager, you're not that interested in your parents. But as time went on and they found out about the blog, and what I assured them was that I would never write about them. And I still haven't. I don't write about my kids at all. So they're all grown and married now, and I have 3 grandsons. So that's pretty amazing. And I really love that what they know now is that they can call me day or night. I'm there. Never have to worry. Oh, it's past 8 o'clock. Can't call grandma to come babysit because she's going to be into the box, So that's pretty wonderful, is that it's shown them. I really feel like I've stepped up as the matriarch of this family in a really wonderful way. But that's not exactly what you're asking. You're asking what they thought of it. And when I finally got the nerve to tell them I'd been writing about this and that I was this person online that was helping others and telling my story, and that I had this kind of secret life, my one son, who was 14 at the time, said he thought it was kind of like Superman. He said, it's like you have this alter ego that helps people. And I could just cry now, even telling you that all these years later, because that wasn't the response I was expecting. So I think they're really proud of me. And shortly after I quit drinking, one of my sons got into a bit of trouble, and I didn't know how to handle it as a parent. I was in over my head. He wasn't in a lot of trouble, let me say. It was just some really normal teenage stuff, but I was going to kill him, and I knew that wasn't going to help. So I had a friend who was a counselor, and I went to her and said, what do I do with this? Like, I know my instinct is to way overreact. And so she chatted with me, and I said to her, well, I've just quit drinking myself and blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh my God, talk to him about that. That is the best thing you can do, not just because you're modeling abstinence. That's not the point. The point is you're modeling problem solving, and you're showing that you saw something wasn't right and you did something about it. And that was a real eye opener to me as well, because that wasn't my instinct to share that with them in that way. So yeah, over time, they're proud of me. They're proud of me now. And
I think that question, like, leading to, how do you approach, perhaps mistakes and weaknesses as a parent? I mean, I felt it myself, even though my kids are so young, they've never experienced my addiction. Is this, sort of enforcement of, avoiding the mistakes. And until it becomes a shared experience, it's just an enforcement. And how much, our children will benefit from knowing their own parents' weakness and their own parents' challenges, I think is the night and day approach of a better connection. And like you say, like, I mean, a sense of pride and a sense for a young mind to understand that there's other people that I look up to that make mistakes as well. I think is the greatest teaching platform.
I think to be just really pragmatic about it too. Like, this is how it is. Like, one of the reasons it was so easy for me to accept that my recovery was going to be forever was because my dad, who has now passed away, but he quit drinking before he was even married. He was quite a young man when he quit drinking. So when I was 5 or 6, like, I was little, and my sisters were older than me, and they told me my dad was an alcoholic. And I said, Dad, they said this about you. And he said, yep, that's true. I am an alcoholic, but I don't drink, because once you're an alcoholic, that means you can never drink again. And so you guys will never see me take a drink. I never will, because I can't. And he didn't, we lived out in the country. He didn't go to meetings that I knew of, but I knew he got sober in the rooms. And I knew from a very early age that that's just how it was. Like he never drank again because he couldn't. And so I saw that modeled for me. And I think it didn't prevent me from developing my own problem. I've got to say that. Unfortunately, we can't prevent our kids from that. But he did show me what to do. And he implanted the solution by just living it. And so I know that for my kids. And the other thing is, I tell them all the time, like, they're normies, they have like one beer that they forget about at the family barbecue kind of thing. But I'll say to them, like, don't forget, you guys, you have my crappy genetics. Like, sorry, like, you might have got the looks, but you also got the alcoholic genetics. So I just we keep it lighthearted, and they know that. I wish we could somehow prevent them from any kind of pain, this and any other kind, but we can't. So I think modeling the solution is absolutely the best thing we can do. And I'm happy. Gosh, you said it at the beginning, I'm living this happy, full life. So true. I mean, life isn't perfect, but I really feel like I'm giving it my best now. And I honestly could never say that before in my life. I never felt that way ever. So It's never too late.
I mean, relapses are growing, overdoses, in this part of the world anyways. And I'm just reflecting on people that I know, and, wondering what it is that I have that I wouldn't give up right now, that they lost track of, and it's tough. It's tough to sometimes to admit that, like, I think that's absurd. And I think it was one of your poems. I can't remember, but it was like in the grief loss section, how could you, I think it was, or, how could you do that? And then the question went to, I can't remember. We'll leave it to the readers, but it made me think about perhaps what they were missing, what they lost track of, what they've forgotten. And that wasn't the end they were looking for, to never be heard of again. And so it's just, as a show, to acknowledge that anybody in a position of change, having gotten off the fence, perhaps you just got off the fence. I mean, don't share your story necessarily on a public forum. Share it with somebody else. Have your hand ready and available for someone else reaching out. And I appreciate what you do, what you've got available for anyone and everyone. So let's check out Jean McCarthy's website. It is
JeanMcCarthy.ca.
Okay, I didn't want to say it wrong. There you go. We'll have it linked on the show.
Thanks.
Again, thank you very much for joining us on Talk Recovery. All the best.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this. It makes a difference, and I'm glad you're here.
We got a minute left. The Bubble Hour, when does it air? Weekly, monthly?
It's a weekly podcast. There's 300 plus episodes in the archives. So it's on Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find it, just the Bubble Hour.
And the blog?
The blog is Unpickled Blog, and both Unpickled and the Bubble Hour are on Facebook. So you can find both of those there.
And the book comes out in?
June 19th, the book comes out. And it's on Amazon, or you can order it from your local bookstore, ebook and paperback. But all of those links are on jeanmccarthy.ca, so you can go there and find it there. And just keep looking. What I always say is that recovery looks for similarities, addiction looks for differences. So go explore what's all out there, but look for the similarities, because that's where recovery lives.
Thanks everybody for listening. That's an awesome statement. I'm actually gonna tag that somewhere, probably today on Twitter for some responses. Thanks for listening. Talk Recovery Radio every Thursday live on 100.5 FM and powered by New West Recovery, Last Door, and Westminster House, Canada's recovery community. Darren, it was good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being on the show. Have a great
Thanks so
day,
much.
everybody.